All right, welcome to the March Writing Challenge with yours truly, Laura J., and the amazing people who join me this day and the days that will follow, because together we are going to break the days that we have been under the trance of, so that we can actually recognize. Right before this, Abby reminded me of the fact Zoom is not a private platform when they keep a copy of everything. And it's important for us to recognize that more will join and not have the benefit of everything that came before they joined. And the same is with the recordings. And it ties into the public and private piece that when we are recognizing the online realm for what it is, we see that it is not actually private at all. Because if we have a conversation here that is private because the recording was not to be shared by anyone here, there is a copy kept because it's like in the blockchain. There is a record of everything that takes us back to the moment when that transaction happened. Because it is an action and there is a trans before it that changes its meaning from it being a personal exchange between those present to now being a public exchange with those who gain access to the recording of it. So, whenever we are dealing with public and private within the mixed war for our consciousness and conscience, we have to recognize that anytime we're in no man's land, which is literally what the virtual reality space is, there will always be a copy. There will always be a record because it's public, even though it's public private, because every domain we visit is a private registered corpse that has people acting on its behalf to orate for it, hence corp oration. And so we become half of that which we speak on behalf of, and what we allow to represent us or present us instead of, or represent us instead of us being present to do it for ourselves. And so the writing challenge this month is actually going to be about where we take notice of that which then we recognize we need to notice others of our noticing. I noticed that this is not okay. And I'm going to let the man or woman responsible for dealing with that know that to not deal with that is a trespass on their public duties. So now we're talking about a different version of the public than what it seems we're talking about within the platforms that literally we've all been pushed into using because of the certificate of VEX, identity death, AI PSYOP, that was designed to move us into a technocracy that merges our biology with the platforms that we are connecting with others on and through, and then that which we allow to merge with our physical form in order to now be the new norm, where the devil's mark we never saw was just lived backwards. And the mark itself was what was issued to privateers, who were private citizens who were given a letter of marque, a letter of commission, which we're familiar with within the days of sales that we are all living within, and then letters of reprisal. So it's letters of marque or reprisal, which is why X marks the spot where the treasure is on the treasure map. We're it. When we know how to stay at the top of the public instead of going into all of it, we just get to the tip. Only need the tip with our ink on a pen tip to write the wrongs that we notice are not okay, and then we notify others. And then that's the way we make claims properly, which is proper in the properia persona of our public image, our public personality. And there was a woman that was going to be joining us today and still may. However, her cat, Autumn, had issues last night that took her to the vets, to the Emerge, and she's in that. But this morning I was looking back at a conversation she and I had from 2022. And what she said, because she has so much value to contribute based on doing this for about 40 years, trying to bring things together, including 3 websites, the first of which I connected with her in 2017 over Earth Project 777, where she was sharing the triad wave, which was a frequency that could be embedded into people's work in order to settle the nervous systems of those who were listening to it in order for it to be more relatable, settled, and programmable. Because that was already being used against us, but we're not aware of it. And Brenda was also the one who warned me about the dangers of getting involved with neuroentrainment technology, which BrainTap was a big piece of my expanded state of awareness that went south real fast in terms of an awakening that wasn't handled well because my ego was more involved than what I was aware of at the time. And that's because the ego is the public persona. It's how we interact with all of these spaces. And so why I bring up Brenda and give that context is because she, in that note I read this morning from 2022, said that our personality cannot hold spirit because it's the sphere of us that the ghost needs the host for its gnosis. Gnosis being the spiritual path that is walked until another asks us to follow theirs, at which point we have to leave or abandon ours in order to go where others have known where to go. And this actually takes us back to the ark, and that's archetypes, but it also speaks to Noah's Ark and the Ark of the Covenant, and the fact that Genesis is the first part of a manor roll or a court roll. And that's very significant because if we are implied to be part of Noah's tree genealogically, then we are under the house of the lived backwards without knowing it. Because we didn't see the holy sea that was the unseen until we were standing on a trap door we didn't know was a trap. And then the door goes out from underneath of us and we're in crap. And we're alone because so many others had to abandon us en route to getting to the point where we actually stood on that trap door and got hung, that nobody is there to support us and we need one another. And so what stood out in the note that I read of Brenda's this morning is that our soul has to trust our body enough to hold our spirit, because spirit is the energy that flows to and through us. And our soul is the individuated expression of the all that created all of us, that counterfeit versions of have been created and changed in the spelling of it because it's the spells that we've been getting deceived by. And when all of these men and women of the past got hung in the witch hunts of the past, I believe the question asked was, which craft are you specialized in? Which craft? Is it law? Is it medicine? What's your craft? And which one is it that I know your eyes have been specialized in, so I don't try those tricks because you already know those?
And which language are they using?
Language is the land gauge, which is why the laws of the land only refer to the lands that have been claimed as domains, which then entrap us through auxiliary verbiage, which auxiliary means volunteer. And this is why I bring up Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp's house as often as I do, which may seem silly to those who are new to the idea that la maison d'etre is where we became debtors, to the tramp's house. Tramp being an unscheduled vessel that doesn't have a scheduled load to deliver because they're not being paid yet. They haven't agreed to do the job, which is to rob others on behalf of the souveraine, which puts us under a true queen. For ver means true or right. Reine means French for queen. And sous means under, which brings us to the diddle of London Bridge is falling down. Sire sous dans devant derrière, devant derrière, devant derrière. Sire sous dans devant derrière, à côté de. On, under, in front, behind, beside. Where are you in relation to the house that wants to claim you? That's what we have to know, which is why the genealogy of the Genesis being one of the chapters, I believe the first within the Bible, that requires us leave our own way in order to follow his, who wasn't even living when the text was wrote about him, who is an I shy of je suis en français, which is I am. So if Jesus is an I shy of I am, and sui juris is one's own right, that we think is all right to act as if we are, when we are one's own right, then we are implied to be part of the collective that has been incorporated under the concept of we the people. That's a fallacy. We the people is an entity, which is an ideation separate from us, who are actually said to be part of it. So that is not what we are, but we're implied to be it, just like our person. And this is where we stop fearing our person and start recognizing how the usage of it is part of the usufruct, quite literally. Fructing being the extracting of rich fruits off of someone else's tree that they gave you permission to benefit from the sale of under the age of sales, SAILS. For we are all the vessels for the souls that have soul corporates made in our likeness and image. Likeness and image not being the same as what the original was, hence aboriginal being the status that brought original people away from being original to being coined as part of the concept they then identified with. Entification being the process of making something mental into something tangible. And when we entify, then we identify with. And there is an entity in the one-dimensional entity that we have invited into our self-concept through the box that we check to say, that's what I am. No, this is what I am. That box reflects one aspect of me that I decide will help me maneuver in the system I need to step into and get out of as soon as I can without losing my rights in the process, by knowing how to write them. And recognize right is spelt three ways for a reason. RIGHT, for what we do when we notice something is not right, and we say, this is my claim in writing that I will make to honorably notify you I have a problem. And I'm not going to blame anyone for it. I'm just going to give you a time frame to deal with it honorably, respectfully, and in good faith. Because good faith and bad faith are capitalized concepts within legalese, which is the language of a higher court. And this is because language is the land gauge that governs us when we don't see there are highs and lows of the same thing known as dialects, that then we are dying because of the election we have made with the inner pole. The inner pole being between the heart and the head. And then also to know that within the sojourn, you have a solo journey. And then within journey, you have two words that if you start and end the word with JOY, there's your joy that starts and ends the journey. But in the inside, you have an urn left. Well, the urn with the URNE is the vessel that transports a cremated body in, right? Well, did you know that without that E for the energy we surrendered to be rendered by the system for its benefit at our expense, URN actually means a ballot box. So the ballot box is based on who we have checked the box of where identity is concerned. So the writing challenge is to also see that as well as the RIGHT of that right, you have the WRIT of what we wrote in the present. And then in the middle, we have the rites of passage that our souls must go through in the reclamation of who and whose we truly are. So we breathe that in and recognize birth and death are what make up breath. And on the tombstone, there is only a dash to represent all of what we did during our lives. Unless we left a legacy big enough for others to see after we are no longer here to stand for ourselves. It's the leg I see standing after. I'm not here to do it for myself, my legacy. So then I ask ye, what kind of legacy you wish for? What is the legacy you wish to leave behind? Because what I know for sure is that over the last 4 particular years, I really stepped into the savior complex or the martyr in a way because I wanted to save those that didn't realize what was going on. Because somehow I found pieces and keys and information that led me to believe things to be a certain way. And I wanted to wake others up to that truth and create a wake, which are the ripples that come out from where a pebble is dropped in the field of consciousness. So I wanted to make that wake happen for others. And they didn't appreciate me rocking their boat. Who would? Who appreciates having your boat rocked when you're just trying to row, row, row your boat gently down the stream? Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Wasn't that about a stream of consciousness?
We don't have that right to do that without their permission.
Who doesn't have what right?
We don't have the right to suggest to someone else that they should be doing something different without their permission, without their free will.
Free will. Will he or will he not? Did he or didn't he? Isn't that what's all over Hollywood's tabloids now? Did he do it or didn't he? P. Diddy? It's the scandal of all of the freak offs that he would host where famous people would be invited and there were rooms, graduations in rooms at this party where first you'd bring out some of the alcohol and see and party favors and see who was open to it. And if you weren't open to it, you didn't get past the next door. But if you did, then you did. And when you got to the next door, then more was required of you. And silence was part of the deal. So the further you went into the game, into the freak off, the dirtier it got. And when it got dirty, then it was recorded. So now there was evidence to use against those who played in order to get paid or to get themselves ahead in the game of A-listing, right? Hey, Tara Lee, it's awesome to have you with us today. Oh my goodness. So this
Good
is
morning, Sarah.
literally, we were talking about P. Diddy and the Diddy or Didn't he files. Tara Lee, what were you going to say?
I was just saying thank you and hello.
Yay. Yeah, thank you. And it's so wonderful that who is meant to be here will be at exactly the time they are meant to be. And who is not missed exactly what they were not meant to have in that moment. And sometimes that's because it's the power of who we know and who knows us or who wants to know us that is how we really come into formation, that really changes everything. Because if we actually get back to the fact that life is a relational game, at the time of my expanded state of awareness, when I got locked up under the Mental Health Act for 2.5 life-changing weeks, that set me on this path, because then I was really, for quite some time since then, proving my sanity by tracking a story that no one else has pieced together because it's been intentionally disconnected and segmented and fragmented, like in the corporate realm, where I don't know what the ones above me are doing. I just have to look after what is mine to look after while I'm in duty to perform those duties. And then I don't have time for anything that's not mine. I just have to push these papers in order to get it done. Well, that's what administration is. And so when I was in an expanded state of awareness, I realized, well, I heard, or however it went, I knew, do not squander your social currency. And Panda, aka I Am Wellness here, has a trust factor app that is potentially in development that is my add or overlay onto his idea in the presenting of it for the name has been changed with the way I have introduced it. And the readiness of introducing it generally may be with us or may not. But I don't know because it's my perspective and my sharing of someone else's thing. And I say that because that's what happens when we let others speak for us. So I'm going to let Panda share, if you wish to, what the premise of that concept is.
Yeah, so originally I was calling it the trust filter because I was trying to filter people in such a way that we start to recognize who we trust and who we don't trust and the degrees of that, not making it so black and white, but the layers and the levels of trust that we have with different people. And then when Laura J mentioned it, she maybe missaid or misspoke, but also maybe meant to be the trust factor. It's like the X factor, that added thing that I feel I haven't seen in other communities implement in a way that I'm kind of envisioning it. So as I've been trying to form community, I've been doing this almost outside approach, outside in, where it's like, oh, get the land, set the concepts, everything on paper makes sense. But the X factor is us. We, the people who we trust, are what's going to make or break that community. Infrastructure has never been the issue. It's always been anytime something falls apart, it's a people problem, which means there has to be a people solution. And so what I'm offering is a platform for us to look at how do we trust people, under what conditions do we trust, and that trust is dynamic as we grow and learn more about people. That trust either grows or diminishes as people's actions affect and influence us in ways that we can't really control. We can only control how we react to the situation. And so over time, I'm envisioning that through this network, we can start leaning towards our circles of trust. And the tighter that circle is, the more we can do as a single body, still respecting the individual, but through that trust, we become a stronger unit. And my analogy for all of this is like the analogy of the cellular organism. So we started off as prokaryotes, and those are just single-celled bacteria. And what I find interesting too, and I'm sure Laura, you could play with the words on this, is that their limitation is to only form colonies. So bacteria can grow, but only through sheer mass. They just grow and grow, and that's called a colony. And that's the limitation. And so you could call that archaic and old, but it has been what has survived this long. And then evolutionarily speaking, we transform into what's called the eukaryote, which is now a smaller cell merges with a larger one, and they form a relationship where the large one provides protection and says, I'm so big, I can protect the little guy. And the little guy inside can say, well, I'm so small, but I'm resourceful, and I can manage the resources within our network. And so that would be the first marriage. The first community is really the merging of two, like the husband and wife, who come together and complement each other, and then they multiply. And then through that, we form a multi-celled organism, which the many pieces inside serve different functions. And then through that, those multi-cells can form it's called a tissue instead of a colony. And through those tissues, you can form then organs, and then the organs compose of the human. And then it gets, so like my general outlook on life and philosophy is like, the idea of God is really just another layer along the fractals. So I am like a God to the cells of my body, although I might not have a direct communication line with it. I control or I manage what goes into my body, the environments I put myself in, and my body will respond to those situations. If I eat something that is poison, my body will respond. If I'm in an environment that's cold, my body will have to warm up. And so I'm envisioning us all trying to find our place in this world where we understand like our function, and we're serving in our best capacity. So there's no conflict between the lungs and the heart. They're just serving their purpose for the greater good of the whole. there is no money exchange between, you know, the different organs and parts of the body. We just put things to where they need to go. And so to me, creating harmony within our body is also creating the harmony of the community. And so that's where, and we have to have that trust of ourselves, trust that the body knows what it's doing. Trust that when I need to heal myself, I'm assisting the body. I'm not telling it what to do. The body has wisdom. And so creating that trust within a circle, it makes us a more fully functioning human being or soul. And that's the trust factor.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And actually, it takes me to Abby. You had invited me to a call that Greg Braden was speaking on. And I appreciate that very much because he is someone that I would like to bring into these conversations because of the value that he has already contributed and demonstrated himself contributing in the world. And Brenda, who wasn't able to make it, I actually recorded a little segment of what he was speaking to when I realized his book is called Pure Human. Because her theory with Earth Project 777 and the other projects she's been working on as well was in relation to the holy human. And so the holy human, I break it down to be the whole E for the energy that make up us. And the holy human is one that is able to be pure in intent. And it reminds me of Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. Be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, always do your best, and don't take things personally. And I say don't take things personally last, not because it's placed in that order, but because it came to me last. And I know personally that I have taken things personally in the last 4 years when I have not been well received because of how I've been showing up, what I've been wanting to share, and those pieces that others don't understand. Because when you do want to share information that is not familiar, it's foreign information, it's not comfortable, it doesn't fit in the territory of me. Thank you very much. You can just be on your way. It's like cognitive dissonance. The best example of it is like bringing a new baby home to a household of full-grown individuals that love to fight and abuse one another. And now you've got this precious little newborn coming into this house that say, get that out of here. It only takes one looking after that baby to ensure its survival, right? Like, we got to be that one for us. And when we realize that we can have a lot going on in our system that we would do differently if we could, or if we knew better, we would have done better, or maybe we didn't do better and we knew better, and there's a story behind that that we haven't really got to the root of to keep us doing that to ourselves. And so really going into all of these pieces is what really help us become more able to respond, for ourselves to be able to do what they naturally do best, which is heal themselves, to stay in wholeness. And the way that we do this and don't take it personally when others don't understand or get us is to have our own shit so together that it's solid underneath our feet, and we stand on that. And when I say shit, I mean ship high in transit, baby. This is high-level information as Tara Lee joins in, who's actually doing a workshop next Saturday at Soul's Path, next door to where I am right now. It's a lomi-lomi workshop, and Tara Lee, if you want to actually share what you're doing and what people can expect from attending, I'd love for people to better understand it. I've experienced a lomi-lomi session with Tara Lee when we met at Soul's Path last year through the Hub for Humankind, where we've got another event happening at Soul's Path in Blackstock, March 16th to 18th weekend. So it's the long weekend, and that'll be happening where Tara Lee's doing her workshop next weekend. And so if you want to take it away, Tara Lee.
Absolutely. And I have been, although my camera was not on, I was enjoying listening while I was making the cats happy and quiet in the background. So thank you. And it actually, resonates with what I will be offering. So Lomi Lomi is an ancient Hawaiian healing, and the workshop will be a full day experience. And the purpose of it, like, who is Lomi Lomi for? It is for everybody. We all have a healer within us. That person that always wants to do the right thing for somebody else. That person that's looking to soothe our own soul, and to how do we find that within ourselves? That's basically what this workshop is about, is to be able to tune in more deeply, to listen to your own body for your own needs, and also when in connection with others. And for me, Lomi Lomi has been absolutely transformational in being able to do that and to access that communication and that connection with all humans that are around me, or animals even. And so that's basically what it's about. So we'll be having some fun time, doing some interactive practices so we can experience what it is to get to that other realm of connection, but then actually go through. It's kind of like an introduction and intensive combined, because we're trying to keep it quick. We don't have a lot of time to before the world starts giving us challenges and exciting new things to uncover. So I want you to know if this is beneficial for you. And so we're going to go right into it and go through full experiences so you can feel what it is to be a receiver, feel what it is to be a giver, and experience that fully. And then we'll be sharing on that. But yeah, that's basically what it is. And it totally tied into what you were talking about with the body. The body is so in Hawaii, there's the three selves. The unapili is the child or the body self, and then the Yuhani is the mind self, and then there's the Aumakua, which is like the connection to the spirit consciousness, our higher self. And the body knows and has the blueprint for our perfect health, our perfect emotional and physical health. This is one of the things I was playing with and trying to condense into a small little box last night before I went to bed. And as we pay attention to that, those microorganisms that are ourselves, we get all the information that we need. We came here as that newborn baby with everything that we needed to right the wrongs for our ancestral lineage, essentially. That tiny little speck is what sends the message of our blueprint of what we need. And so anyway, I love that it all like tied into the beautiful things that I was playing with yesterday. So thank you for the opportunity to share that.
Yeah, thank you. And please do share in the chat the details for your workshop next week, so then I can share that in the replay of this as well. And there may be others that didn't know it was happening, but will now because of the investment made in taking the time to listen to what's being shared today, that you who are not in view didn't get to participate in live because you did something else. And that's the reality. Life is full. It's full of whatever we fill it with. And so being intentional about where we wish to camp out at in terms of intent ions, where do we want our ions to camp out? And that is from an emotional perspective, that's from a literal perspective, and it's also from a consciousness perspective, because I love that Tara Lee, you brought in the concept of the physical self, the heavenly self, and you've got the higher self and you've got our own selves. And then there's the consciousness in the middle, which in the teachings of Summit Lighthouse that I produced the Michael and Laura show back in 2011 or 2021, that was my introduction to those teachings and the ascended masters, quote unquote. And I say that because when offering the decrees within that body of work, I could feel the entities feeding off of the people offering their decrees. And when I spoke to it, it was refuted, and that's not true. And that's not happening. But I could feel it. And I doubted myself. And so I continued asking the questions and investigating and produced 12 episodes for the Michael and Laura show. And then I broke up with that ideology and thought system generally, but the record of that investigation is still active and in the present tense, as if I were still pursuing it or as if I still supported it. But it was the 2021 version of me that is featured in those videos who was investigating that. And so I say that because it goes back to the beginning of the call, Abby, when you had said about the Zoom making a copy of everything. Well, when we're online, this will always be in the present tense. There's not going to be a version of this that is made in the past tense or the future tense, even though for us who are in this moment, that viewing will be a past memory for us who are here to do this together. But those who watch it are going to see this as the eternal now moment for them, wherever that is. And so it's really important to recognize that with the Michael and Laura show, there's a track record of me promoting a teaching system that has entities feeding off of those who identify with an externalized concept that so many mystery schools and teaching bodies have been taking and reappropriating for their own purposes. Because it's about coining ideas, because the dia is the big idea at the top of the dia tree of creation, which is the genealogy. It's just of ideas, because you've got mystery schools, you've got schools of thought, you've got bodies of work, you've got bodies of thought. Well, where are these bodies? The corporate body, have you ever seen one? Outside of the figureheads working on its behalf that come to speak to you for the corpse that they represent? So going back into the teachings of Summit Lighthouse that Tara Lee had mentioned in the Hawaiian tradition of the three consciousnesses, that is also a concept shared in the teachings of Summit Lighthouse that were channeled by Elizabeth Clare Prophet and her husband Mark Prophet, who was her mentor before then she became his best student who outpaced him. But that is what the intention for a truly good teacher always is. Not to sleep with your student, but to actually let them and help them go faster and further than you, obviously, is what I mean by that. But when I say obvious, and we all smirk because we know that it's a not to do, but how often does it happen that we connect with people in our field of interest or our field of occupation? And so then we step into those. And then it's because we build relationships with those we spend the most time with. And I'm sure you've maybe heard the expression, if you don't grow together, you will grow apart. So if you don't have a shared vision, it's like my realization, it's just recently really, is about focus. Like if I'm focused on my finger and you're all focused on the tip of my finger, we're actually creating a fixed point of interest between now 5 consciousnesses and whoever else joins in and focuses there too. Well, when offering decrees within the teachings of Summit Lighthouse, that's the same thing. The decrees are then the focus. And what is a decree but a spoken oration of what is official? So what is official is incorporated. And when we start recognizing that if all of our focus is here, that's what a triangle is. We're underneath. The pyramid, it was just everybody's focus was on the dia at the top of the dia tree. And so then that was the big idea. And then ologies, which is the study of the thing, were created, which are ideologies that were what people studied in order to promote the school of thought, which Bologna is the first university, or that was where the first university was that taught the legal society or legal system and disseminated their BS, belief systems, to then put it onto the people who formed smaller groups, family units, corporate units, community units, all of these units. Did you know that we're traded on the stock market as agricultural units? It being a stock market because we are held as but stock or cattle within the market, and then our chattel being our stuff that we have as property that is proper to us. And it's property because it ties us to that which is material and physical, and that we want to make sure that we maintain possession of, because possession is 9/10 of the law. Hey, Peter, it's awesome to have you with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
I can join for a little bit.
Fantastic. He's at work and tuning in on his break because we make time for what matters to us. So if you just want to mute out, Peter, because there's reverb, unless you've got something to say, that's a great way for me to know who's got something to say. Because in this space, we have courtroom etiquette that is not a courtroom etiquette because it's not written and this is not a courtroom. However, did you know that the page is the court? The written page that we write on, that's the court. And when we think about the court, we must think in terms of tennis. It's a back and forth. So it's the court is where the game takes place. And then when we actually take it from being a court, the page is a chess game. So you've got a black and a white color icons, which are icons because iconia for a reason, by idolizing that which is external and little idols. And then we've got the little cavalier, which is the knight, which represents the ecclesiastical class of Roman days, which had to have a horse in order to have on hand should a war be declared and they need to stand above their men. Well, you ride on your horse, your stallion, your faithful steed, instead of walking with the troops, because those are the paupers or the peons that you can pee on because they're below you, quite literally. And then a peon is the French for pawn. And so that's another character in the game. And the bishop, well, that's buy shop. So you've got your mercantilism in the name of the bishop that has bought you if you believed in the BS of ecclesiastical law, which is where the double entry booking accounting system ties in. And most people are not aware of it. You've also obviously got the rook, which is the castle, and that's the domain. And the domain makes the main character do things through transitory verbiage. And I just actually, when it dawned on me, Sur Soudan, devant derrière, when that song came to me as being significant, I wanted to know why. Because usually when something sticks with me or comes to me and then it presses me to be curious about it, there's reason for it. Well, there was definite reason for it because Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp are used intransitively and require être as the auxiliary, voluntary, conversion tenses used to draw us into their manner. So the domain of the rook, of the castle that is claimed, dominated by the one who claims dominion over his domain or hers. There we have domain, dominion, domination. Dominion with an @ sign in it to make it dogged language. Because if it's mixed jurisdictions where there's a king in both colors on the same board, then nobody's won the game. It's nobody's jurisdiction yet, because there's no body that won. The body of the king on the chess game table has to knock the other king over in order for him to claim the other's territory, which is exactly what happened with David and Goliath in the Bible. They both represented different people and would make the other slaves or servants to them if they lost. Well, the little guy wasn't expected to win. The little guy wasn't expected to win. And I said wet because I was thinking bet. He wasn't the one anybody bet on. In the alphabet, where the alpha gets bet on. So when David won and the giant lost, that actually is what started the enslavement of the people that Goliath represented. And that is not because I am biblically oriented, as you know, but it is because that's where the enslavement took place because of what is referred to as vassals. A vassal, V-A-S-S-A-L, is the holder of title. And that's where Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp come back in, because that's just a title, Dr. and Mrs. Those replace the name. You don't have to refer to them by their name. If they're just Dr. and Mrs., that's good enough. That's a title. That's an address. Well, you got the address on postal terms under the Postal Service, that ties in with the law of correspondence in the 7 Hermetic principles. And if we remember that, then we see that the other 6 laws of the Hermetic principles, those all have counterfeit versions created in the corporate realm that has to incorporate that which is true, the law of correspondence. There is a cause for every action, or the cause and effect, right? The law of correspondence, what we interact with, there's a change that takes place for it. I don't know what the definition of the law of correspondence in the Hermetic principles is off head right now. Does anyone else? Well, I think that's why we're in the situation we are, and we're getting out of it. Because when we understand these principles, then we see that principle with an LE is not the same as a principle with an AL. Because the principle is the one that we had to go down to see in the office when we were not well behaved as children, or if there were a problem, we'd have to go to the office just to make us relegated to the student position and the principal be the office holder when the student didn't realize the student also had an office. The school was their office. The principal was just in a higher position within the office. Make sense? Relevant? Abby?
Well, it's not like we had a problem. They had a problem with us. We weren't having a problem.
Who weren't having a problem?
Well, we had to go to the principal's office. It wasn't because there was something that we did wrong. It was they had a problem with us. We were just being us.
Right. Right. Yeah. So sometimes we got called down when we didn't even do anything wrong.
I might even like throw in, because I feel like everything gets inverted. Everything maybe had a pure intent. So when I think of principle, it's like, oh, when I do something wrong, I have to revert back to my principles
Yes.
and go, oh, how do I correct my wrong? By going and seeing my principles and counseling myself to get back into that state.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is we're not actually doing anything wrong. As children, we're growing and we're learning, we're expressing ourselves. It's not wrong.
No.
Well, yeah,
So
maybe the wrong.
they want us to fit into a box, but we don't fit into that box.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
they're the ones with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm understanding this correctly, Laura J, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. The purpose of like this call was to essentially create our own box, that constitution, our set of principles that we have created for ourselves. Now, granted, the system you're talking about, Abby, there's like, because that's the system. Yeah, we're trying to fit in their box, but we never. What's the word, like? I didn't consent to that box necessarily. I was just put into it and assumed I would consent to it. And I think by taking our power back is us creating this new box that says, no, no, I am stepping out of this office, moving into my own, and creating my own set of principles that I adhere to. And I hold myself accountable to those principles. So in some contexts, I can be wrong if I say one thing and do another. Right? If I say I have these principles and I'm going to behave in this way, and then I go and do something different, I'm out of integrity. And to bring myself back into integrity is to follow my own principles, or to reassign the principles if maybe I'm realizing that those principles were wrong. Mm-hmm. So is that what we're going to do, this writing challenge?
Yeah, integrity means wholeness. Mm-hmm. It means being whole. So when we understand that integrity means that we're not sacrificing or compromising an aspect of ourselves or our CELLS, we're not compromising an aspect of ourselves for the sake of a benefit, which is what happens within the corporate realm. We accept titles in order to benefit, and that title then makes us the thing that we were implied to do before, but now we actually are implied to be, which is Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp's house. Because passe is actually not one of the verbs that made it into Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp's Memnonic, which is a memory tool that basically takes a bunch of words and then puts them into an order that's more memorable so we can access it more easily. That's what a memnonic is, or a memory tool. And that's what Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp's house is about, which is referred to as the house of being, la maison d'être. It's d'être with a chapeau or a hat over top of the E for être. But then that chapeau means you're owned by the one whose house you're in, because if it's my house, it's my rules. We hear that oftentimes, right? And I'm saying that in that way because oftentimes there's a lot of sass that comes with that amount of power. And we've always heard that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so this is why we need to recognize that if passé stayed out of the verbiage but still uses the rule, that means to come back or to go back. And then demure, which to be demure is pretty offhanded. You don't want to be that lacking in personality, public persona, properia persona, personality, demure. That actually means to stay or to live. Usually conjugated with avoir, but with être, it means to remain. So now, demure, which means to stay or to live, is made into a verb that means to remain when it's used with être, because être is I am demure. Je suis demure. And then that makes me the thing that I did before. So the whole thing about benefiting, a beneficiary is the title given to the one who accepted a lot of limitations, liabilities, obligations, debts, and duties in exchange for the benefits issued by acceptance of the T's and C's, the terms and conditions. But we didn't realize the T's and C's meant we needed to be the ones to define the terms for ourselves. And the conditions are the parameters of the boundaries that we agree to when we check the box to say, sure, I'll do that. I'll do that is an action, do being the verb. So just to kind of speak to this for a final piece, and then we'll ask questions to better contextualize why I keep emphasizing Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp's house in a house about personal responsibility or getting our own house into order. Intransitively is without a direct object, so always requires être as the auxiliary, unless there is a direct object to make the verb transitive, using avoir instead of être. So intransitive is être, and transitive is avoir. So what that means for a couple, descendre, is to go down when using être, but when used with avoir, it means to take down. So have takedown versus I am down. So it's, do you see what I'm saying? Like entre is to go up or is to go in when it's using an intransitive verb of être. But to take, bring, or put in is what it becomes when used with avoir. So it changes the meaning entirely when we're implied to be the domain that is claimed under the head of our space as the main character who was able to then impose rules onto us, compared to when we know how to actually remain the one who benefits, even though we don't choose to take on the title of everything that comes with being a beneficiary. So the beneficiary is indebted to the house they came from, quite literally, in terms of the title. But the one who benefits is able to stand independent of that which is able to benefit us. Does that make sense?
No, I think you need to repeat that.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is the difference between coming from the House of Rome, which is where the church comes in because land, air, and water are all capitalized under laws of the land. That is only referring to a capitalized or coined, contained area. So beneficiary is within that, because that coined domain is where the main character is the beneficiary, which means that other people get to administrate what the beneficiary receives because the beneficiary is only benefiting. Others are administrating it. When we are the ones who are able to remain the principal, able to stand on our own and speak for ourselves capably and competently, then we maintain the right to benefit because we can write it in writing to make it a writ that we can put into our manor roll. And when we are able to do that, it shows competence for caring for our own house. And that means that we have the rights that we have claimed in writing that then become writs that we can save as claims in our manor roll. And that is what allows us to maintain the right as the principal beneficiary of everything that is due to those under the power of the house that created it. So our name and the straw man is the beneficiary under the house. However, if we understand how to only put in the tip of our identity in the public, that allows us to stay as the principal in the office of man of competent capacity with right to make claims that others have to challenge in their private capacity in order to contest what we claim. And if they won't, because they're still part of the house acting with titles, then our claim stands as true and we get to keep that record as true in our records, which are private. Does that make any more sense?
If I'm understanding correctly, it's just that straw man, that character in the box is only benefiting and has no autonomy because they're just receiving, and that the box itself is kind of dictating what we receive, and that by standing in our capacity to recognize that we are more than just a beneficiary, or that we have capacity to stand on our own 2 feet on some foundation, we can be recognized as that. And that, because it's outside of that box, outside of the beneficiary role, that that can't be, that is made true because we deemed it as true in this realm, I guess. And yeah, so the further question is like, how do you do that, essentially? And I just assume at this point it's just simply a declaration of, this is where I stand.
Declare, clarity. So we make clear what we notice. And then we make claims in our notices that we send to people in positions of public capacity as well as private capacity. Because when we have cause to find remedy with another because of something that is not right with us, we must write it. And to what you said, the beneficiary appears to only benefit, but with the title beneficiary comes many limitations, liabilities, obligations, debts, and duties on top of the benefits. So it seems like the beneficiary is only meant to benefit, but it's kind of like with a driver's license, for instance, which requires us lie to our senses to say that we now only drive, because that's all a driver can do. So a driver's license makes us lie to our senses to say, oh, all I do is drive. That's what a driver does. That's my status. I didn't know that driving is a commercial activity. So when I'm traveling in my private capacity with all rights reserved, not conducting any commerce of any sort, why am I going to define myself by the action that I am doing en route to living my life or in the process of living my life? Why am I limiting myself to being a driver all the time when I just want to benefit from the ability to maneuver a vehicle from point A to point B sometimes and maintain my rights always. Why can't I do that? Who says I can't do that? And whoever says I can't do that is then one who is personally trespassing against me. If it is the name of a corporate entity that is coming against me, I can't face off with a ghost. Are you crazy? You think I'm crazy? How do you prove your sanity if you're facing off with entities, though? Which I believe is part of why I went through what I did in 2019 to experience what happens when someone who is very sane but doesn't make sense to a corrupted society is not safe unless we know how to stand on solid ground. And that solid ground is our notices. That solid ground becomes what we create as a manner role. That manner role becomes how we stay in honor because we know how to wield our pen to make claims in writing that we want, that we wish for, that we will it to be. So a living will is said to be what is required in order to have wishes should something happen and medically you want to know that you're provided for. So you have will and wishes. That's your will. A living will is implied to be limited to medical decisions, but we can make our living will be whatever we will it to be, quite literally. It is based on our will, which is magnetism. This is why fighting against anything is only going to trigger our nervous system and keep us in fight, flight, freeze, fornicate, or F off. We're not actually in a creative or productive mode when we're in a reactive mode because we're just pretty tense. Which tense, though, are we talking? Past or present or future? Intense? We're talking of a not now moment. We lose power when it's not now. There's no power in a moment that hasn't come or in a moment that has already passed. We can't change those. We can influence the future, but the past is only going to see us looking in a rear view mirror, getting in an accident ahead of us, which is what so many people have been doing through all of the insanity where we know something's not right. And so then we're chasing as fast as we can down as many different rabbit holes as we possibly can because we know we're fast runners and not everyone is. And there's a lot of people that need to be saved from what they don't even know is upon us. And yet, if we try to save others who don't want it, are we really helping?
Yeah, exactly.
19 seeds is about it.
And how do we know how happy they are in their space?
Mm-hmm.
And by presenting something different, that could be completely changing that and doing much harm.
Absolutely.
And that's hard. That's
Acceptance
hard to. It's hard to accept because we want to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What you're talking about, I believe, is acceptance. Acceptance for where they are is exactly where they need to be until the appropriate amount of discomfort comes naturally, not by me, but by their own life path, universal things, just like it does for all of us. And then those of us who are holding the light to another way provide safety. It is safe to be you where you're at now. And when you change your mind and you are no longer feeling safe there, it is safe to come over here. And we are still here holding this light if you would like to share it with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also to remember that light moves in two directions.
Mm-hmm.
And light coming back upon itself burns.
And there are people in a higher vibration that are looking at us the same way that we're looking at people below us or people that don't have a higher vibration where we're at. And they're saying, come on, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this positioning is part of what has been unraveling us. Because if we have to be at a certain level, then we have to be in relation to something else. And if it's kind of like when we go to a race and we're at the starting line and we're looking down the line at our competition, and how fast do we think they're going to go, and what have they done before, and oh my god, it's so and so, and then we start shaking in our boots and we don't do as well because we're measuring up to someone we have no right to measure against.
I
We're
wanted
not them, it's our higher selves. That's who we look to.
Well, and to me, growth comes from inside. So it doesn't matter what somebody says on the outside. If I'm not ready to receive it, I need those pieces, right? Like babies learning to walk, right? You can't make them do it. They have to go through the stages, or a bird coming out of an egg, or, you know, the strength and everything comes from the inside, from the internal growth. And so does the breakdown in the humus, right? The merging of all the different pieces.
Mhm.
I wanted to speak on the idea that, everyone's on their own path and trying to reach that level, and we can't necessarily impose. And what came to me was like being in a choir and singing. And so in school they had the whole like grade like all together, and so like you got like 50, 60 kids, and not everyone can sing, but in the group you have enough of us harmonizing together, it sounds like everyone can sing. Because so as leaders in the frequency, as we harmonize together, we are setting the tone, we're setting the pace for how this music comes together. And so even if they're not quite at our level, their voice will still contribute to the volume of what we're projecting. And so for those willing to stand on that stage and to be part of that, it's not about us all being the best singer, it's about us all harmonizing well together. But you do need some leaders in that to, like I said, set the tone. So that was the vision that came up as you were mentioning that. Just felt like I could share.
Was it you that actually said yesterday when we were talking about when, or maybe it was a reel, but they said that in order to control one civilization, they only had to kill the leaders. Like the 5% of leaders that were in the midst of the people, they just had to take them out. And then nobody tried anything. And it's kind of like the monkeys in the experiment where there's bananas at the top of the tree and then there's a spraying system underneath of it. And so whenever any of the monkeys try to get up there, the monkey gets sprayed and everybody else at the bottom gets sprayed too. So it's like first monkey tries it, everybody gets wet, and second, tries again, and then happens again, and then it's just like third time going for it, and somebody else pulls him back down. Don't even think about it. And then we become a crab in the bucket society. That the only way, or crab fishermen, I guess I don't know for sure, but all you need to do is put one crab or one lobster in the bucket, and I don't know, maybe it's not with lobsters too. I've only heard crab in the bucket, so maybe it's not lobsters, but you put one crab in the bucket and they won't let any of the other crabs go out, and the other crabs won't let them go out either. So everybody is keeping themselves in line, which is exactly what we find with Cartman's drama triangle, which is the victim, rescuer, persecutor dynamic. That means that the villain is villainizing or victimizing the victim, and then the rescuer didn't have a role until they had someone to save from someone else or something else. And then we're in this dynamic where if we actually think about all of the movies in Disneyland that are following the general hero's journey framework, the hero is generally a drunkard or loser societally or socially because they had big dreams and haven't made it and were a big failure. And then all of a sudden crisis emerges and they're ready. And then now they have a task and now they get to be the hero. But before that, they didn't have anything going on, which is the reason that we are the ones that have to create what's going on in our world. We intentionally create that and direct that. We get our own houses in order and we connect and come into common unity with others who are doing it as well, who are willing to show up, who are willing to contribute, and also not take time just for the sake of it. but to know that when we do need time and space, to know how to express our needs so that then we can actually get what we want instead of having to beat around the bush in order to get to the point where somebody's able to clarify what we want. And then if they're still able and willing and ready, then we can go there. But how often does it work where somebody's wanting attention and they're just giving surface, you know, hi, how's it going? What's going on? And that surface level conversation that oftentimes we don't make space for if our attention is on deeper and bigger things. But at the same time, how do we make it so that we know how to engage with one another to demonstrate respect and that we're honoring one another's time by getting to the point without also barrel rolling those that just don't know any different and are just doing the best they can and don't have the training and don't have the exposure to all of what we're creating, and then they feel bullied or belittled or in some way diminished because we've put down rules they didn't know were in existence and now suddenly feel like we're this or that over them. And then this idea of the victim triangle comes out in our head and we don't even need another party to play it out.
So are you talking about creating a community? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying? And it's a community where everyone is valued
Mm-hmm.
because there's no anyone higher. There's just people who have different abilities and everyone can work together and respect everyone and help everyone with their needs. Okay.
Yeah. Tara Lee, you were going to say?
When you were speaking, it was you were saying declare clarity. It's the stories that we make up in our head that do not get declared out to the person, whoever they are, with full love and respect. It doesn't matter if I've talked to you once or 20 times. Bring my story out to you so that we can both be clear on where we stand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is part of why the empowered storytelling method is required at this time to be introduced in order to get us out of telling the story from our head and from our memory banks and get back into the heart and the presence. Because when we've been through a lot of trauma, it takes a lot of time to go through those stories. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of time to unravel and to hear the same story and to hash it over and over and over and over. And then we're just in this cyclone. So the empowered storytelling method is based on moving out of the seed point, though it is required to begin. And sedes, S-E-D-E-S, is actually connected to the holy sedes of the Roman Catholic Church, which sedes means seat, S-E-A-T. It is the seat of the throne. The holy sedes has brought in as the seed, which the martyrs have planted the seeds for the church, because a good martyr story is how the church grows, because others fall in love with the one that was martyred and then they follow them. And then they stay stuck in this cycle. But the seed is where the wound took place. That's where the raw pain is. And there's great power in pain. There's great power in a seed that is planted and then allowed to blossom. And I remind you that a lotus flower actually takes 5 years to emerge from the mud. So that is a long time of gestating. Just the law of gestation is the law of gender in the Hermetic principles. That means everything has its own unique gestation period. And so when we actually realize that instead of telling the story from being in the seed of the wound that common expression that you tried to bury me but didn't know I was a seed. Like, yes, that's very powerful. And like resonated with that for a time. And then now I also see the fact that I don't really want to have to climb or dig through all of that dirt to get to that seed anymore. I don't want to have to go back to my trauma and dig in that wound. I don't want to pick the scabs anymore. I would rather actually go to the top of this flower, this tree that experience gifted me with the blossoming of, and find the beauty in that, which allows me to find the beauty in the seed without getting into the dirt, the mire, the mud of that which I went through in order to get to the lesson that was the gold that experience held for me. And I say that in hopes that it's useful as we go through this process, and be as involved as you wish to be. And I'm still setting out the calendar and the events and the content, but I'm in this with you. I'm not sitting here thinking I'm better than anyone. I am offering the best that I have, because how I share it doesn't always come across, and there's important information here. But what is equally valuable is the people that I know that have come today, that were invited today, that will be invited to future meetings. That's the gold. When we get out of the head of information and into formation where we see the value of all of us, like, that community is sustainable, and it's based on a culture of care, which is the cult you are. So if we're going to be part of a culture anyway, which is the cult, we might just as well create one that we enjoy. And I've heard it said, and I think it's kind of funny, but also true. It's just like, what's the difference between a religion and a cult?
There is none.
There's not, but I heard it said that it's when it becomes, or it's about the leader being living. That's the difference.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah.
If the leader is living, it's a cult. If the leader is dead, it can be made into a religion. Because then it's the legion that you're going to be put into, where then you have to do only to the level that they did. Because going any higher would be disrespectful, right?
Religion, it's like you're resurrecting the legion,
yeah.
Right? The followers of the Christ before, you're now resurrecting the dead and trying to reclaim this new culture off something that is old and dead, instead of actually something that's living.
I don't remember the exact definition of religion, but it has something to do with binding. And so it's entrapping if you're being bound to something.
Mm-hmm.
And cult is, to me, a culture, and that's something that you create. And I don't think there's, again, a right or wrong with anything. It's just a choice. Like when you were talking earlier about the box that they created with all the rules and the beneficiary and all of that, I mean, that's what they created. And not knowing any better, being born into it, we just followed along for survival. But there's a part of us that's intrinsically alive that says, wait a second, I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense. I didn't agree. It never made sense in the first place. So, stepping outside of that, you're telling me all I need to do is send them a notice. I don't need to be a part of their game. It's a game they made up. I don't know their rules. I don't think I need to know their rules. I just need to say, wait a second, I'm not playing. See, this is what I'm doing. And I don't even know that I need to give them that notice. I just think I need to live my life.
Yes,
I stand with that as well.
Hmm?
I'm just agreeing with Abby there. Like I stand on that as well. I don't need to play their game. I don't need to acknowledge them. But I need to declare it for myself. That's for me the piece that I find most important, most valuable. And if I am confronted, then I will stand in that. I'll have a document. I'll have something that I can say, nope, you're accusing me or trying to put me into your game, and I'm telling you I'm not playing that game.
Yeah, you need a cues? Like you need a cue to play along?
Oh, a cue. Yeah, interesting.
Right? We're playing pool. It's just, are we going to be in the shallow end or the deep end? And with what you actually said, Abby, about bindings, it's connected to bindings and loosings, which is the equivalent to debts and credits within the spiritual context. So this is about the soul entrapments, because yes, you don't need to declare it to them for their sake. But as Panda said, you do need to declare it for your own, so that you have solid ground to stand on. Because what I heard you say, Panda, is that I stand with you. Well, there's the part of me that wants to use an expletive, but it's just like, where the F are you going to stand? You're fornicating under carnal knowledge. If you don't think you have to interact with the corporate realm and can just make claims that you're standing on a charter that you've never made rights, you've never claimed rights to actually have as yours, you're standing as part of the collective. That's fornicating under carnal knowledge. You think you're safe standing on a trap door with a whole bunch of other people who are too. That's a scary place to be that people don't realize it. This is the equivalent of walking into a concentration camp into your gas chambers. I'm safe. I've declared to myself. But if you didn't actually do your paperwork, how's the next version of you? Like okay, energy is timeless. It's eternal. All energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only displaced. So imagine our soul just changes form and then goes into another form in another now moment of a future context. So that version of us comes back and gets to experience what we did in this one. But if there's no paper trail, there's nothing written down about what we did, or there's no framework that others are able to relate to so they can collect and then recollect it to others, then we're not standing as strong as we could if we got our house in order and we wrote it not for anyone else's sake but our own. Articles of incorporation is what the manor roll is based off of, or the manor roll is it's based off of the manor roll. The manor roll is the court roll. That's what the courts use. We need to be able to hold our own court. What we can do, and I want to honor today, and I want to keep it to an hour and a half as a conversation, just because this is a tremendous amount of information, and it's way more than what most people have capacity to absorb in one sitting. So if we make it more digestible and then make it more actionable, what today I would really like you to leave with is the need to recognize that we're not doing this for anyone else anymore. We're doing it for ourselves so that we can be the example that others then actually are able to get cues from without being accused of anything. So if we haven't talked it, if we haven't walked it, if we haven't walked it, we don't get to talk about it, is what I meant to say. I think that's the most important rule of right now. Because if we haven't walked it, how can we talk about it except for in theory? We're just in our head. So at this point now, we're laying it out, and we'll keep having these meetings. We can figure out a time when it's going to work for us to come together, and we don't always all need to come together either. But enough of us start coming together, and I'll continue posting to the Peaceful Inner Warriors United meetup group to create the events, and then the other two, the Esoteria group and the New You London chapter, which anybody that is part of those groups, I'm excited to be the organizer for them now, since I've inherited these groups when the price to maintain access to this platform increased, and I almost opted out myself. Because how many of us have been paying a lot of our own money in order to do all of the things that we have to pour out and add value to others? A lot of us. And a lot of people are tapped. A lot of people energetically are tapped, financially tapped. It's hard times, which is another story that if we're going to move out of it, getting our own house in order, getting us into formation, connecting and making personal relationships that are not exploitatively based, that call one another on missteps or trespasses without doing it in a persecution manner, but to own it and move beyond it in order to modify behavior and do better. If we can do that, I'm living in a community, and I didn't do my chore list since I've been moving in, except for I was doing things, but not my chore that week. And it was impacting the community. So I got called on it last week and have to do better. And I am doing my best and could do better and will do better and am doing better. you know? So it's just like when I got called, it was like, okay, I get it and I will do better. And like, I'm going to go back and get it looked after today because the chore list changes tomorrow. So I'm going to get it done by, or not tomorrow, it changes on Monday. So it's just like, I'm learning to work within community standards, though I don't entirely like it because I like being able to do what chores I want to do when I want to do them. But now I'm living with others who have it's social contract. But that's what Locke's work is about, and why natural law was coined by him, and why it's not a solid door to stand on. Water. This is so like there's so much, and we've all got huge pieces to share. And I so appreciate each of you for contributing today, for showing up today, for showing up when it works for you to do so in the future as well as we move forward, to put your piece on the table, to create a community where it is safe to do so, to say that persecution is not okay and we're not going to play that way anymore. However, accountability is absolutely required for our soul's sake, quite literally. If we trespass against one another, there's soul ties, I believe, that are created between us who didn't resolve our shit in private and then took it into the public forum to drag more people into our drama. That's my piece for today, and I'm so grateful for all of you showing up. Is there anything we can have a few minutes of I'll just turn the recording off, because if you don't show up when it happens, you don't get to be part of all of what happens. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.